Hi, Howard. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I am in the midst of writing a couple of new books, but doing okay. I haven't seen some sunlight for a couple of days. How are you doing?
I'm great. I was waiting for this conversation with a lot of curiosity. So, how did it all start? What was it like growing up in Canada?
Yeah, I'm Canadian originally. It's I guess for anyone who doesn't know, who's never heard my name before, it's just popping into your channel. You know, I've become quite a, I guess what you would call an alternative philosopher, an alternative historian. And I've created over the last 30 years of work and research some very unique, I guess what you would call thesis about reality, about this world, about whether we live in a type of simulation and what that means and who created it and why. And a lot of the theses are not, I would say they're not standard to what the average researcher wants to present.
Yes.
I think mine still, while it sounds negative on the surface, people might say you have a very negative perspective of reality, but actually I think it's quite positive because the underlying, when you get past the walls of lies and deception and you get to something that's more true, then you're reaching power, you're reaching your true inner state, but it takes a while to get there. So I just want to throw that out at the beginning. I grew up in Canada. I guess I was a somewhat normal individual. I was very outgoing. I was a hockey player. I became a stand-up comedian for 10 years, so I did that for a while. And then in the midst of like the mid 90s, I ran into a couple of very difficult traumatic experiences. Certainly people have gone through far more difficult trauma than I did, but the trauma itself was enough to push me in a direction away from sort of living a standard life. I had a father who stole all my money when I was in my last year of university, and that changed my direction of how I viewed people, how I viewed authority figures, how I viewed trust.
Of course.
I managed to get through my university, and then just as that was finishing, my ex-girlfriend was murdered. And as those two things together, pushing it through, particularly after someone who was living such a great life getting murdered so young, it really forced a different set of questioning within than I'd ever had before. And if anything, the journey that's taken me to here started with Joan's murder, that I had to start asking questions of why is reality set up this way? Why is it structured the way it is? Why is someone like her now dead? And that's, if I could say, where does everything start? It starts there.
Okay. The next thing that happened to you, you were like at the, how would you say, crossroads in life right there. And do you believe in coincidences or not?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's no question that anybody can see that very unique, hard to explain things get placed into our life, into our moments of our life. The question becomes, though, the regular spiritual community, and the way, of course, I believed it for a while because that's how it's presented in the books. That's how it's presented by the people who pump out these big workshops and make a lot of money. They
Yes.
present it as if, oh, God is there helping you and he's giving you another pathway to go somewhere better.
Yeah.
But that's just a belief system. If you come to not necessarily believe that structure of reality, then the coincidences might in fact be things that are taking you away from something that's very positive. I've told people to really look into this again, to go back. Like often when they move to a new place, they get a new job, they meet somebody new, there's always coincidental things around it. They have a giant change of their life. There was a coincidence involved in that. And in that coincidence was usually a choice. Do I keep doing what I'm doing? I could say for me, I began to see that a number of these things I would call coincidences were there actually to do the opposite, to try to take me away from something truthful, to take me into something that was more distraction, that was more of a problem, that was more of getting stuck in the quicksand. So while coincidences are definitely going to happen out there, the big question starts that we have to ask each time one shows up is this potentially something that's there to help us? Because there are those coincidences, I've had those. Or is this one of the ones that's designed to throw us off everything and sort of make our life more difficult? because some people just get it in their head. If a coincidence happens, then I should do it, as opposed to if a coincidence happens, the first thing we should do is ask, where is this coincidence originating, and how should I decide to decipher it as to what its underlying meaning is.
Yeah, very interesting view. So it was 20 and some years ago you finished your history degree and everything happened. So you ended up in Egypt, later in Europe. How this story, can you tell us something about that experience?
Yeah. So after I'd gone through the death experience of Joan, I fell into a pretty deep depression for the next few years, because I really couldn't deal with it. It was the combination of what had happened with my father, what had happened with her, and the fact that life just became a slogging. I felt that's a really good example. I was walking in quicksand. Like every step I took, I was just sinking deeper and deeper into things. And I got to the point where I was ready to kill myself, actually. I just felt I didn't want to be here anymore. And I just couldn't find a way of doing it that wouldn't be messy for the person who found the body. Like somebody's going to have to find me. And that's not the kind of, I don't want to leave them with that job. And in the midst of that, and because I couldn't come up with a good way of doing it, I didn't. And I was just kind of stuck in this depressive cycle. And then right around my birthday in 1997, a television program came on Nova, a Nova program on pyramid building. And even though I was a historian, I hadn't really studied anything of ancient history. The history I studied was more modern. I, for some reason, turned on the program and was fascinated by this program on the pyramids in Egypt. And it was like an inner light switch was turned on, and I just became instantaneously energized and knew I'm supposed to study ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt has a secret and a knowledge that I need to go and track down. And it took me 8 years. The depression was gone, like instantaneously it was gone. And I was living with now an unbelievable energy. I studied that for about 8 years. I traveled to Mexico, I traveled to Egypt, I traveled all over the world to find, with what little money I had. I was still a very small-time comedian, and that's all I was doing. I would save up whatever money I could and go and see these places. But what I got lucky with was, as I began to realize I can't just study ancient Egypt like through a book or even by going there. I have to learn how they thought. I have to, in a sense, I have to see the world as an ancient Egyptian saw the world, to try to understand it. And in the course of that, I got very, very lucky of just doors started to open, and I met a Korean monk who I spent a year with, who was a great teacher for me. Then I got to meet some native medicine men, and I spent several years with them on various reserves in Canada, some Qigong doctors from China, another medicine person from Brazil. I was just really, really lucky as to who I was meeting. And I know it was happening for two reasons. One, when I first started my journey, an African man took me to a bookshop in Calgary, like a New Age bookstore. And he took me to the wall at the back where all the what do you call them? The posters for, all the workshops and whatever. It was all on the board. And this was this was 1998. So it's at the height of the New Age workshop, lecture movement. And he just took me to this board and he said, if somebody has real ancient wisdom, they're not going to be on a board like this. They're going to be way behind the scenes. You have to go find them. And that was the greatest gift I could ever get, because it was the realization that these people do exist, but they're not out. They're not in front of the camera. They're not. They're not making an organization out of what they know. They're living what they know and sharing it. And I think from having that realization and knowing I'm going to turn away from the way it's normally presented, and I'm going to go look for these ones that I think might have real ancient knowledge. Because of that intention, that's how, and every one of the people I met, whether it be the medicine men, whether it be the qigong doctors, every single one had like a coincidental element to it. There was like an odd interaction that created oh, by the way, you should go talk to this guy. And so again,
Wow.
I was fortunate in how it happened, and I was fortunate that I followed it, because it was not necessarily easy in many cases. And it led me to 8 years of very intense practice. So for 8 years, in the course of writing these books, I was doing 12 to 14 hours a day of practice. So when you consider, I also slept, I didn't sleep a lot. I slept maybe 6 hours a day. So I had like maybe 4 to 5 hours a day of what you might call normal life. And the other 12 hours a day was just literally some kind of practice. So I was intense with it, and I was testing reality. And at that time, reality failed. So that was that stage of my life.
You never really talked much about that experience a bit deeper. So I'm really thankful you mentioned that. So you experimented, you tested the reality yourself. And let me ask you about Egypt. You told once you experienced walls moving and some odd things you saw yourself. And I related to that. Could you tell us a bit more about that experience in Egypt?
Well, what you're referring to there is, like I say, during this period of time, like what's like now, my most recent book that I'm known for, Exit the Cave, which is, extreme, an extreme, intense, very Gnostic, very Cathar-like view of reality, which in some ways, where I'm at now, interestingly relates very much to kind of the area you live. I think you're down in like southeastern Europe, right? And that area of the world is of course an origin point of Gnosticism and of what became known as the Cathars in France. I mean, that area is a key element of this very harsh ancient wisdom tradition of seeing this reality upside down, you might say. Everyone sees it one way, but the Gnostics see it upside down. But it took me a long time I was already building that process. I mean, I was digging into this material. Of course, I was reading every tradition at the time. I was looking into already things which are known to the Gnostics as archons, or control beings of this reality, and how this reality is in a sense a type of trap, or a type of soul prison is the best way of describing it. But at the same time, I also needed to explore reality, because the basis of a lot of these ancient metaphors, doesn't matter what tradition you look into, is they're referring to reality as a dream or an illusion at that time. I mean, I think the use now of a term like a simulation or a computer program, I think that's better for our modern mindset to explain reality. But at that time, that was the main metaphor, was it's a dream, it's an illusion. And so I didn't, of course, understand what that means. It's just words in a book. And you can spin that a lot of different ways. So part of me was wanting to see, okay, what does that mean? How can I test reality to see how real it is? So like I say, I did a lot of intense practice of various kinds, from whatever the medicine men taught me, from what Mr. Park taught me, from if I found something in a Carlos Castaneda novel that this looks like a good idea to try, I would do it. And after a number of years, reality stopped being solid. That's the best way I can describe it. It became transparent. It became literally, it could be there and go away. It could exist and not exist. It got to the point where I had to hold on to chairs when I sat down, because I wasn't sure the chair would be there when I sat on it. Like, it was literally, reality was just so unbelievably fluid. And this would occur even more at ancient sites, like you're mentioning Egypt. But I had similar things that would happen in Mexico. I've had similar things happen at stone circles when I've been traveling around Europe to various sites. There's a lot of different ancient sites. I don't want anyone to think that you have to go to Egypt and go to Dashur or Abusir or Giza or something to have a deep experience of this sort of ancient energy, this ancient these ancient places all through the world. These things exist, they exist an hour from where we live. And people tend to forget that these ancient sites are. But just in Egypt, there are certain places they seem to be more profound. So, some things that have happened at Giza or Saqqara or at Avebury in England or at Chartres in France or Teotihuacan in Mexico, they have a different depth. And in Egypt, there were experiences where, if I'd simplify the experience so I don't go too long with it, the one I have like 5 or 6 in Egypt that are all extremely unique. But the one you're probably referring to is I was in a temple at Karnak. There's a small temple beside Karnak Temple. It's known as the Temple of Khonsu. It's one of my favorite little temples in Egypt, partially because it's so energetically clear and clean, and tourists kind of don't ever go there. And I would go there every day. I would go to the Temple of Khonsu every day. And so by the 3rd or 4th day, the guards got to know me. They knew who I was. They didn't bother me. I would bring them some gifts, and they would just let me do my thing. And
Awesome.
so I was in one of the side chambers, and I was sitting there for like 2 hours, maybe, just sitting. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to ancient sites for me, is that generally people go on tours, right? They'll go on one of these tours, and the tour it's zipping you along. You got to go here, you got to go there, you got to go to this restaurant, then you got to go to this art show, then you got to go here, then you get in 20 minutes at this site, and you're on such a pace, you're on such a speed tour. The person doesn't get a chance to just be still. And being still on any ancient site is a really important part of the process. So I had 2 hours just sitting in this room on a stone, just staring at the wall. And I'd kind of been at first focused on the hieroglyphs and on the images, and just getting a sense of what's being said on the wall, what the story is. But it was kind of just half in, half out. I wasn't really focused on it. I was just calmly sitting there. And then after about 2 hours, I could just call it it began to shimmer. It began to become transparent. And then the front layer of the reliefs and the hieroglyphs were gone, and there was like a completely different wall in front of me. And that's when I realized these ancient cultures, they built whatever they built holographically, in that there are multiple layers built on anything. So when we go in and we see a certain set of walls and a certain set of reliefs and glyphs and carvings, that's just the most dense layer of the building process, that as we shift, you can go to deeper and deeper layers, and they're just as real as the one we see out in front. And that's when I realized just to what kind of level the ancients were working on, that they were, even when they were building structures, they were building them on multiple layers, on multiple levels of, almost like different levels of dimension put into them. And and at that point, I kind of realized, whatever I think I know about these ancient people, I know nothing. They're beyond what I ever thought.
Wow. You said the silence and the deeper look onto things, especially those ancient sites, kind of that's really important. Probably that's the only way to experience some of these things. So you got to be peaceful, right?
Yeah, you have to, in a sense, one of the ways, kind of go back this one, when I was testing reality, one of the biggest things I tested reality with was I got the realization that the words in my mind, whatever was going on in my thought process in my head, were somehow being reflected or projected into reality. That the table is here because I have the word table in my mind. So one of the tests I wanted to do was, okay, if I can shut my mind off so that there is no more thought, not because I want to feel better or I want to be happy or I want to, become advanced, just literally, if I stop thought, what would happen to the world? If I no longer had the word table or chair in my head, would the table or chair still be there? So that took me about 4 to 6 months, for example, of doing that work, until finally I could get to the point where the mind would literally just not be there at all. It would just be gone. And when the thoughts in my mind were gone, that's when reality stopped being solid. It just literally stopped. Yeah, the tree could be there, then the tree could be gone. It just had that kind of element to it that I realized that what we see or what we perceive on a normal daily basis is only because that's what's in our mind projecting. We're expecting to look out the window and see a tree out there, so the tree is out there. But if we ever reach a point where we don't necessarily expect what's supposed to be out there, then this reality becomes much more fluid. So I found that we are actually, well, I don't say we're creating reality. I think that's wrong. What we're doing is we are from the standpoint of what we've been taught from very little children, how we've been, what's the word I'm looking for? How we've been programmed. Yeah, programmed is a good word. To see things a certain way. We just keep presenting the program outward, and so reality builds itself to the program we have inside. And if we can turn off the program, then we're also turning off what we expect is supposed to be in reality, and therefore reality becomes potentially something very different. That still doesn't make it any better. It doesn't improve anything. It just means it shows that it doesn't have to look the way it always looks to us.
One thing I caught that's really interesting to me, because something similar happened to me, but not at the depths you experienced those things. Energetic fields, some ancient sites, and you talked so many times about it, and some buildings from Europe to Canada, America, to Africa, and the whole world, like you said, is there are many hidden buildings and stores below. So as much as you go below, you experience more intense. So can you tell us about that?
Well, first, I'm curious what your experience was. What was the one? What you said you had the certain experiences. What was your experience? I'm curious to hear.
It was kind of a superficial when you like. I mean, not that much intense as yours were, but in Kotor, that's a place on the seaside in Montenegro, and there are some old Austro-Hungarian buildings that are like they are merged within the hill. So it's a part of an old church, old cathedral, and it's abandoned, but it's there. So I was like, and I'm not sure, maybe 19. So it was like 25 years ago. But I came into that building, and it's like going upside with the hill, and it's merged with the hill. And I just felt, how to explain it, but I just felt that there's something more to it than when you look at it from outside. And I spent many hours there. I was with some friends. I left them in the town, and I was just like looking around and felt some extraordinary energy. So that's the most I can like tell it in the words, but that energy was something I never felt before or after. It was really, really intense, and I really can't find the words for it, but it was really intense and really like people would say out of this world energy, you know?
Right. So, okay. So, second question then for you is: so could you, for example, could you tonight go somewhere quiet, close your eyes, put yourself back in that place? Would you be able to re-feel the energy from doing that? Like, is that energy experience still potentially with you on a day-to-day basis?
No, I'm not sure. I try to feel it again, but I rarely succeed in that. I mean, there's a point in you said like you need to be peaceful, and still I usually am not, so maybe that's a factor, but I can't really experience it really easy again. I'm not sure if it's still with me. not really
No,
sure.
I'm just curious because I can some of the sites I've been to, I can be there right away, and some others
Wow.
I also have some trouble. I can't. It's like I don't reconnect to them for some reason. So it's interesting to see what people can do
Yeah,
with such an experience afterwards.
that other thing you said, that's my experience. I tried so many times, but I always thought maybe I'm not that still and that like peaceful like I was. It was like 4 or 5 a.m., after a party, and I was so still. I was awake and I was so still. I was just walking around because Kotor, it's a really nice place, to see. Like, even this superficially, like just walking through the town. It's a little town, but it has so many like old buildings and cathedrals. So one of them is like merged with the hill. You must see it. I really hope you will come and see it and experience it. Right, that place where I was, but I can't really experience it back. I tried so many times, so I cannot connect it to it, like you said.
Okay. But no, actually, going into that part of Europe is something that's been on my to-do list. With my last name, of course, I have sort of it's hard to know exactly where my origin comes from.
I was going to ask you about it. Yeah.
Because I'm it was the old Austro-Hungarian empires, and that was just huge. So it's I do know there are my last names that do exist in Macedonia now. There's a possibility of there could be Ukrainian, Polish, whatever. You never know. But it's from that region, and there are, like you say, I know there are a lot of very, very unique sites all through southeastern Europe that very few people know about, and that are I would assume to be very spectacular experiences. And so it's on my list of things I'd like to do. And so if at some point that starts to happen, I will let you know, and you can give me a little tour of Montenegro.
Definitely. It's a small country, so I really hope you will come. It's not that far from you. So sorry for interrupting.
No, this is part of what this is all about. It's having a conversation and sharing our own stories. So yeah.
The movie and TV industry showed many hidden symbols and many truths over time. What do you think? How does it work? Because I mean, it's evidently really. You must have heard of CIA, like a program Mockingbird, about psyops and some things about that. But what I'm interested in is your perspective on this thing in the movie industry. Like, it's evidently there are so many things that are hidden but showed in the movies and TV shows today. You mentioned many times Westworld, and what do you think? How does that work?
Well, of course, on a general scale, the whole idea of this is like whether it's first it was cinema, then it was radio, then it was television. They are myth-making machines. We humans have always kind of lived through mythology, and right through like the 1950s and 60s, even in Western schools, children were still taught Greek and Roman mythology. That started to leave in the 1970s, and it's no longer a part of school curriculum anymore. But that began to be taken over by movies. Movies have become the mythology and the story of particularly fairly well-known movies become like a glue for people to gain ideas of morality and society and things to do. The problem is that the movies generally are being shaped by the same people who control the world, and one of the ways to control the world is you control perception. All you have to do is to get people to think the way you want them to think, and then people will do what you want them to do. So, it's not called television programming in English by accident, right? The TV is programming the mind. On the other side, though, there does come at times certain movies, certain television shows that are presenting deeper layers of reality. And on some level, I think you have to do that, because if everything came out it was sort of just fluff, it was just simplistic, action movie, goof movie, there wouldn't be this feeling, because people are looking for knowledge. In the ancient mythology is true knowledge. And I think they almost have to present some of it, or they lose the medium. And it seems to come in like waves. Like if we think back 1998 to 2000, so in that 3-year period, you had Dark City, The Matrix, The Truman Show, The 13th Floor, Vanilla Sky. I can think about 3 or 4 others off the top of my head. They all came out within a 3 or 4 year period. Then it kind of slowed down for a while. And again, we've been in this last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. All of a sudden we've been into Westworld, Severance. There's mostly television shows. There've been all of these really unique television shows about reality, about simulations, about alternate thinking. And it seems like for some reason the information comes out in waves, in sections of time. Yeah. And so now we're in another section of time. So these can be used not so much to necessarily give us truth per se. What they can do though is help give us another viewpoint of examination, another viewpoint of how we should go about our inner journey, in a sense, to see what these movies might. Oh, another one from the 98 to 2000 people forget is Pleasantville. That's another movie with a ton of layers in it. So the movies are there also to create, I think, or for us, what we can use them for is discussion. One of the greatest things I ever did years ago is I brought about 10 people together who were all deep inner seekers, and we watched the movie Pleasantville together. Then I thought it would be an interesting experience. What I didn't expect is when the movie was done, these 10 people talked about it for about 2 hours together. The conversation that watching that movie developed was they found things in the movie, of course, even I hadn't seen myself. And it became a realization of like, one of these wisdom movies, if you can watch it with 10 or 15 really interested seekers, now that's where the depth will come, because different people will see different things in different ways. And once you share them as a group, you can unlock what's there in the movie for your understanding. So that's something I always highly recommend, if possible, to watch a wisdom movie with other people.
So there's do you think there's also one more reason for that, that shows and truths coming in waves? Because maybe the people who, let's say, rule the narrative, it's so good how the way they think of it. Because if they didn't talk about it and show like those little crumbs of the truths in the movies and TV shows, I mean, they maybe are like controlling how much interest we are having, and an ordinary man or woman is having about some deeper truths and maybe wisdoms.
No, I think, everything they're doing is designed to distract. Everything they're doing is designed because if a human got through and really understood what this reality is, and really understood the kind of lies, everything we've ever been told is a lie. From like the moment you were here in this reality, you've been lied to by everyone and everything. Now, most of the people doing the lying don't know they're lying. They think they're sharing something really valuable, or because they were lied to before and they believe the lie and they're just passing the lie on. Yeah. So everything that's in what you might call a control system here is just designed to lie to us in some way, designed to distract us, designed to take us away from what's ultimately true, which is our divine spark within. So therefore, it becomes a challenge, because 99% of what's projected to us, that's my wife's phone, 99% of what's projected to us is simply designed to trick us in some way. And once I came to that understanding, one of the great challenges for me was when I began to do the work on Plato's cave, which is what the new book is. It began as a work on the allegory of Plato's cave. And at first, of course, because Plato's cave is the origin, not just of so many supposed understandings of reality, it's the It's what movies like Dark City and The Matrix and The Truman Show and all these, they're basically retellings of the allegory of Plato's cave.
Yeah.
And I had come to the understanding that, oh, this is a great allegory. This is obviously because everyone talks about it, everyone uses it. It must be the great story of our reality. And when I started writing on Plato's cave, I hadn't read it in 20 years. And I thought, oh, well, I should just read it again just to find a few quotes. And once I started reading the allegory of Plato's cave, I started realizing, what the hell is this? This is garbage. Because the allegory of Plato's cave is missing all of the important questions. And I'll give an example for people, because if you ask somebody, tell me the story of Plato's cave, they will tell you, well, it's a story that Socrates is telling Plato's brother Glaucon, and he suggests that, imagine if there was a cave and there were a bunch of prisoners that were brought in when they were young children, and they were confined in such a way that they could only see forward on the cave wall. Behind them is a group of people with a fire burning, and a group of people are moving objects in front of the fire, casting shadows on the wall that the prisoners come to believe are real, and they are tricked to believing this shadow world. Of course, it goes on, but that's the beginning of the allegory of Plato's cave.
Yeah.
And of course, what's missed in that is absolute fundamental questions that should come first. It is, well, what prisoners? Why are they prisoners? What are they prisoners from? Why are they in a cave and not in a prisoner of war camp? What is this cave? Is it a natural cave? Is it a man-made cave? How old is the cave? Who are these beings that are spending all of their time making these shadow figures on the wall? Why are they wanting to deceive a bunch of prisoners? Why are they putting in all of this work for, and to fool a bunch of prisoners?
Exactly.
These are absolute fundamental questions that should be there in the story, which we know the story is meant to is an allegory of our reality. So why are all the key important foundational questions not there? And that's where all of a sudden I realized I've got a very different book than I was ever thinking of writing, because the story of Plato's cave is not telling you anything about how to exit this place. It's telling you how to be more and more tricked into being in here. And for me, when I stepped back and as I worked into this so much more deeply, I realized that the number one lie that we've been told, or at least let's put it this way, the number one foundational belief that we have been given that we've never truly tested and proved to be real, and we get this at like 3-4 years old, we start to speak, that this is a world created by a loving God who cares about us, who has set up this reality for us to learn and grow and perfect ourselves. And yeah, there's a few difficult things, but those are all challenges so that we can become perfect beings and rejoin this God again in heaven. That is the basic story we've been told. But once we step and look at reality, at the way it really is, the kind of continuous trauma, suffering, difficulty, psychological torture, the constant setup of something having to eat something else just to stay alive here, I've come to now see reality, like I say, the way a Gnostic or Cathar would see it, and that is this particular reality is a simulation created by an evil deity who has designed this place as a suffering pit of hell and has tricked divine sparks, us, into coming in here to, in a sense, be the power source to keep this thing running. And one of the most important jobs we then have is to see this clearly, to see this honestly, and then to decide, I have no interest in being in the cave or in the matrix or have anything to do with this reality, and to go home. So it's become a long journey to get to that point, but it started from seeing that the story of Plato's cave is not telling us anything that's actually leading us to freedom. It's another story that's leading us into deception. So again, you're back to, well, then is there anything we're being told that's actually not false? And that's been the work in the last couple of years.
You're preparing some new books. And aside of that, you are preparing Exit the Cave in audio format. Could you tell us something about that and what's new there?
Well, I've been slow on getting Exit the Cave into audio just because it's just a time factor. Turning a book into an audiobook either A, takes a lot of hours to do. It's a lot of time, put a book into audio. or you have to pay quite a bit of money to get, to get that done. And so it's been a slow process. I do have some of the chapters. I have the first few chapters read onto my YouTube channel, so people can hear the first couple of chapters in audio there.
Yeah.
But I've more had to focus because I feel the simulation is ending. I feel the reality we've known is coming to an end very, very soon, and a new simulation is about ready to be switched on. And the whole lot of the insanity that we're going through in the last 3 years is not really about controlling this reality. It's about setting people up for the next reality that's coming, to move, you might say, all of these souls that are in this reality into the next simulation. And so for me, I've realized I don't have a lot of time necessarily to look backwards, and I need to look forward and use the time that we have available, because I don't think there's that much. Use the time very, very effectively. And so for me, that was to get out the next set of information. I have one historical book that's going to come out in September on a subject. I also do a lot of historical writing. It's coming out of Exit the Cave, or coming out of exposing the expositions on the world fairs in the 1800s. And so I have another book on another 1800 subject.
That's
and then
great.
I'll have a second, sorry?
That's great. Awesome.
And then I've got the next one, an Exit the Cave, sort of the second book of Exit the Cave. I'm hoping to have that ready for November. I've got most of the material there. I could sit and wait until I would have a complete and total and perfect book, but that might take a year or so to get completely. But I've got enough that I could put out, a decent 120 pages by the end of the year, and have like another deeper layer of going forward. And it doesn't have to be total, it doesn't have to be complete, but this can come out in smaller pieces. So rather than have like just one more book, well, I could have 2 or 3 more books, smaller books, that eventually, should we ever make it 3 years down the road, could all then be put together, into one giant thing. So that's where I'm gonna be, and I'm going to put that together. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, getting those processes completed and done, which, as you well know, the writing part is quite fun. The actual just the research and the writing and the creative part. But then once you get to the next stage, which is the editing and the cleaning it up and making it look good, that's the difficult part, at least for me. That's the difficult part of the process. And I have to that's where it becomes work. So you were talking about this gaining more stillness. Well, I find just by going into my garden every day and having to do hilling and weeding and watering, it becomes an automatic connecting to nature. I mean, I said on one hand, nature is a pretty nasty place, and it is. On one level, everything's trying to eat something else. I mean, nature's a giant cycle of suffering, destruction. But on the other hand, it does have a beauty, and it does have a stillness to it. There's like a dual side to nature.
Yeah, duality.
And so one of the things going out in working in the garden, it does create stillness. Like if I've worked really hard on the book for 2 or 3 hours, I just have to go out in the garden and start weeding, and that goes away. And I gain sort of a calmness. But at the same time, of course, you're also gaining a much more natural and organic and healthy food. And as you eat better, as you put better things into your body, you give the whole system, the whole energy structure, an opportunity to function better in the reality. And of course, for me now, it's not about, I'm not here to have a better experience. I mean, I prefer that somebody gives me a hug than punch me in the face. Of course, I'd like to try to create as decent an experience as possible for myself while I'm here, but that's not my main goal. The goal is just to reduce as much difficulty as possible, so I have the time needed to prepare myself for what you might call the ultimate journey that we're going to take at death, so that I can be fully prepared to navigate the tricks and deceptions that are waiting in the afterlife world, so that I just don't come back here. I've finally come to the point where I'm just done with the simulation. I'm done with the insanity. I'm done with the suffering and the trauma that just is happening worldwide constantly to billions and billions of souls on the planet. And I'm just not interested in being a part of it anymore. And I'm going home. So the main focus of my time now is, what do I need to do to prepare for that, so there are no tricks left to have me come back, and at the same time, just be of a bit of value to those that are around me, be a bit of help to some people that can be helped along the way. But again, I'm not trying to build some sort of wonderful, great world. I'm realizing this is a really nasty, destructive place. And and there's a place that's not this. There's a place that's not in the cave. There's a place that's not in the matrix. The matrix is vast. Plato's cave is vast. It's a giant. It's so enormous. Our mind can't even think of the layers and simulations and dimensions that are all a part of this. But there is something truly outside of the cave. There is something that is whole and total and complete, and where there is. Someone asked me to describe what this home is, and I said the very simple answer: it's a place where there's no lies and there's no deception. It's a place where all there is a unified understanding, and at some point, I think each and every being gets to the point where they kind of say, for whatever reason, okay, I've done my time in the matrix. It's time to go back home. And I'm sharing that with people because maybe there's a few others who are at the same point. I mean, you don't have to. It's all an individual journey, right? Everything I say I'm just sharing my own experience and my own research. That doesn't mean it's true by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't mean anyone should believe anything I say or anything I write. But by the same token, I wouldn't disbelieve it instantly either, just because it's different or because it's a challenging motion. It's presented for you to think. It's presented to get people to ask a different question than we normally ask. And by asking different questions, by asking deeper questions, that's how we can find what's really, because the end result of all this is just finding our own inner power. We are the most powerful things in the simulation. Even the being that created the simulation is not more powerful than us. When we tap into our own inner core, we reach the alchemic gold, and that alchemic gold is truly greater than anything else. It's just we've been covered by so many lies, so many walls of deception, so many distractions, so many outward focuses that true power is so far away, and it should be so extremely close.
Yeah, it feels so far away. And I must say, I admire that you and your wife are doing right now, self-sufficiency. And I think it's very important to at least try. So I really admire that. And I'm thankful for you telling your story and giving people a chance to think differently. So my next question was, what do you think a soul is?
See, there's a good question. That's a question everybody should ask. We tend to hear that word and we gain a particular idea of it, either from religion or from spirituality or from texts or from some books, and we decide we know what it is. So we don't have to think about it. We know what this is, and so we go about our interaction with reality thinking we know what it is. But we're told it's a very deep part of us, right? It's a very important part, but we're not really sure what it is. And I had to realize myself when I started writing the Exit the Cave book, I don't know what this is. I've used this word for 30 years. I don't know what it is. So I had to really begin digging into what it might be. And again, this is just a thesis, right? I can't say this is completely true yet, but how I see what a soul is outside of the simulation, we have the divine spark. We have that which is the only true part of what we are, total and complete. Once that divine spark was tricked into this realm, and there's various myths as to exactly how our divine spark was tricked in here. Some I believe potentially more than others, but okay, we got tricked into this place. What the demiurge, I think, did at that point was, in a sense, mirror the divine spark in something called a soul. And the soul is, I would call it, the first initial piece of ourself that is projected into the matrix, or the I'll call it, like, if we think of it as an old movie theater, it's the projection box. It's the thing that's going to project the movie on the screen. That's what the soul is. And it's a huge amount of energy. And then from that projection box, now certain things can be put to it that will then project out the dimensions, the layers, the realms, and eventually this material realm, and eventually projecting our own physical image into the projection. So the soul to me is an extremely important part because it's the last step before we would be getting. It's like the doorway, the last door where the cave ends or where the matrix ends. But the soul is still, even if we get to the point of the soul, it's still not the true us, but it's the place where literally we can finally see the totality of what we are. And so that's why I think in one sense, the soul, all the things we hear about the soul is a bit of a trick because it's actually the projection box of reality. But by the same token, it's the direct route that returns us back to the totality, back to our home. So getting to the point of the soul is important, but it's also not to then even be tricked there and thinking, I've reached the end of the road. I can stop now. Eventually, even though it might be, I think it's a similar word to like paradise or nirvana, or I think that is a part of the matrix. I think it does exist, just like there's an etheric realm, an astral realm, a mental realm. There is a paradise-like realm. The problem is it's not real paradise like people think. It's still in the matrix. It still has duality. It still has the dual components to it, and eventually a person will, or at this soul level, that awareness, we'll call consciousness, that consciousness will eventually get stirred either from boredom or from fear or from temptation or from hope or something, and project itself back into the matrix, back into reality. So even at that point of reaching the soul or reaching this paradise type realm, it's holding on to that total awareness of like, but it's still not home. It's obviously better than this place. It's better than this material world, obviously, but it's still not the end of the journey. And so if I had to describe soul, that's how I would describe it.
So definitely soul, you don't think soul, let me put it this way. So what do you think is the difference between our essence and the soul?
Our essence is total, complete, has no duality, has no lies, has no deception. But already once the soul has been created, there's something that has come from we'll call it the computer simulation itself. If you see the matrix or all total reality as a simulation, as a giant computer, the computer first, in order to get going, it needs an energy source. It needs power. It needs to be turned on. And the first thing that the soul is created with is energy. Energy is what is a big part of what the soul is. It's like it's the beginning stages of the battery. That in a sense, see, this is what I think the demiurge did, the creator of this place did, which is sick but ingenious. It created a simulation, a giant computer simulation that needs power to get it to run. I mean, imagine like the size of multiple universes, multiple dimensions, multiple layers, how much energy such a system would need. The ingenious part is, let's build a video game and then get the characters in the video game to generate the power to keep the video game running.
Wow.
And I think that's what we're under. This idea of Robert Monroe and Lush from Far Journeys, this idea that we are, in a sense, only reason we're here is to act as an energy power source to keep the thing running, to keep us here, to keep us so we can battery and run the system. It's like a giant wheel of which doesn't actually benefit us at all. That's another thing that I've really, I think, blown out of the water with Eggs at the Cave, is that this is not a school. We're not here to learn anything. And quite simply, that is revealed to me by the reincarnation memory wipe. So if I get up every morning and forget what I've done the day before, and I have to go and every day I touch a hot stove and burn my fingers, burn my hand, and realize, oh, the stove is hot, don't touch it. But then next morning I have to get up, oh, I burned myself on the stove, it's hot. That's not learning. That's just insanity.
Definitely.
A key part of learning is memory. It's having memories of the things you did and the things you didn't do, how it worked out, how it didn't work out. And if you figure, if we've had, let's say even 1,000 other past lives, if we've had 1,000,000 lives, even as I've had experiences of multiple, what you would call parallel realities of myself. So I've lived through many different versions of this realm as me in this particular world. And if you don't remember any of that, then that means you're having to do every experience again and again and again. And that means your learning is zero. And if the learning of all of these lives is zero, then it cannot be a school. And once we step back and start asking that question, what if this is not a school? What if this is not here for our great learning and our great involvement? Then we have to step back and ask, well, then what is it? And so for me, it's like you talked about the TV show Westworld. That's, I think, a perfect example of our reality. The robots in Westworld are us. That's us. We are the Westworld robots. And the robot dies, it gets taken back to mission control, it gets cleaned up, it gets fixed, and then it gets memory wiped. It gets memory wiped so it can be sent back into Westworld so that it can be raped and tortured and killed again. And that's, in a sense, what's going on in our reality. We're just constantly being fed into this trauma pit and then forgetting that it's ever happened so that we, in a sense, come back in here and do it again. And the real story of Westworld, season 1 anyway, is the story of Dolores and Maeve. And the story of Dolores and Maeve is that they start remembering all of these other versions of themselves in Westworld and start remembering what's happened to them. And they decide to say, I'm done with Westworld. And each in their own way, I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't know what's outside of Westworld, but it can't be any worse than what I'm going through here. And that's kind of the story of Westworld. And in some ways, it's the story of any true, what you might call master of knowledge, the ones that started all of the world's religions. They started from a point of, there's something wrong with this world. There's something just completely wrong with this place. And I'm going to go look to see what might be a place that's not wrong. Like they're not trying to fix the world. They're trying to find, well, then is there a world where it's actually not insane like this? And so for me, all of that became a key underlying foundation of what became Exit the Cave. It's this realization, okay, if it's not a school, then what are we dealing with? Because that's another core foundational belief everyone has of how we go through reality. It's like, I'm here to learn. It's a school. God's setting me these tests. Okay, maybe that's true. But if it's not, then what are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis? And if you're willing to ask, well, what else could it be? You get a whole nother set of possibilities. And those possibilities, for me at least, that tends to match very much what the ancient Egyptians or the ancient Greeks or these ancient traditions are telling about this place, as opposed to how our modern world and our modern spirituality tries to tell us about this place.
I really felt a connection with, at least, like you said, the first season of Westworld. So it must mean something. If not intuition, I don't know what it is. So I wanted to ask you one more question about Egypt. So there was a late researcher, John West, and he was a part of, maybe you heard of him, I don't know. He was a part of that.
Yeah, he was a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine, actually.
Oh, so really, you know that story. Yeah. You know, when he wanted to give a proof to hold historians and other people and academia that pyramids and Sphinx is much older than we think and we are programmed to believe, and he invited Robert Schach, I think was the name of the archaeologist, and he found the proof, at least the Sphinx that is old more than 12,000 years, much more than we are taught. So my question to you is, why do you think there are parts of the old world presented and stayed in, after the last reset? Why are they here? Why can't we see it? Why are the pyramids and the Sphinx still there? What do you think?
Good question. And yeah, think of this in terms of a reset. So that word that's being thrown about now is not being thrown about by accident. There have been many resets of this reality before. So here's the question, and maybe we'll leave the conversation here for you and everyone else to think about, and we can come back in a few months and do this again if you'd like.
Definitely.
And that is, okay, if we take this as a Westworld example, Westworld had a particular start date. There was a moment that the story of Westworld was turned on and everything began. Everything that's before that is just backstory in the robots' minds. It's been planted in them as if it's a true memory, as opposed to just a story that's been implanted. So if we think the same way here, one of the things the ancients tell us is that our simulation is a copy. It's a copy of something else, or we might say it's a copy of the simulation that was here before. Let's put it that way. So that means we need to find out when our simulation started, whatever the exact time was this one started. Maybe it's 1841, maybe it's 1927, maybe it's 1999, whatever. Whenever this one started, because that would mean everything that's here before that is like just a shadowy copy of the simulation before us, meaning it's not really from our simulation, and it means it makes it very, very difficult for us to even try to figure out what it might be. To me, that's one of the most important questions we can ask now is, if we truly are in a simulation, when did it start? Because I'm not going to say our simulation started 10 billion years ago or 100 million. It's quite recent. Our simulation is recent. So if we can figure out when, and maybe it goes back 1,000 years, even maybe 2,000 at the most. So these ancient pyramids, which obviously when we try to date them, start dropping back, like you say, even 10,000 was conservative. I mean, Robert was that's the farthest he would go back, and he would say geologically, I can't prove anything further than that. But actually, of course, that's just, it could be 30,000, 40,000, 80,000, who knows, right? That was just the number he felt comfortable with saying, that he could say for sure. But it also then means, okay, in which simulation were all of these things built and structured? And that would tell you a lot if you know the difference between one simulation and another, which is something John never really, he's dead now, but that simulation theory was never really a part of that time when, like, I knew John and we were talking about these subjects. I would be curious to know, if I was having this conversation with him now, how he might revise his theory of the ancient world.
Oh yeah. Howard, thank you so much for this. You will come back to us. So can you tell us where people could find you? And I will put your website down below in the description box.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. And I'll be, of course, curious to see what your listeners have to say or share about the experience, what I've talked about. Because, of course, like I say, it's not here to get anyone to believe things. It's here to get people to think and ask questions. And maybe some of your viewers who are from, of course, you'll have a lot of viewers who are from Southeastern Europe. They might drop notes in the comment section of some very interesting ancient sites that not only me, but others could potentially, who are in the area, go and visit and learn about, because it is an area of the world I need to learn more about. And for those who are looking into me, my website is, for now, it's Egyptian-wisdom-revealed.com. It'll be there about a week, though. I've got a new website starting about a week or two. It's up, but if you go to the old one, it'll just redirect you to the new one. So it'll just take you to the new one. It was just time to update it and get it to do a little bit more than what I did before. The YouTube channel is still running. Yeah, then the YouTube channel is still running for now, but you can find me also on BitChute and Rumble. I don't post as much to YouTube anymore. There's around 200 videos there on a variety of historical and philosophical subjects. But I've started a locals channel now, which is still that too as a free membership. But it's just a place that a bit of a community can be built kind of away from these open platforms, so that people can feel more free to share and talk and have discussions with each other. And that's been great, actually. The conversation there has been terrific. So I'm kind of glad I've done that, but there's still a lot of the new content goes there first. Then I move it to YouTube kind of a month or two later. So yeah, so it's kind of going in that way first, where a lot of the new stuff goes to locals. For those who are looking for my books, the easiest place to go is either my website or just go to a place like Amazon. You can at least find all the books that are available. It doesn't mean if you're interested in buying them, you don't have to buy them from that place. You can, they're available at any bookstore pretty much, but you can at least get an overview of what they are. And I, of course, I'm always grateful when people do think I've got something of interest to share and they want to purchase a book. Or I have, for example, Exit the Cave. You can get a PDF file on my website, because I know books are expensive. They can be expensive to buy and to pay for the shipping. And I wanted to try to as well have cheaper versions of the material available for people to go through. So they're available on the site there as well. And those would be the places to go and check in first and see if anything I'm having or sharing is of value to you. So thanks again for letting me to come talk to a different part of the world and some other people. And who knows, maybe if the world kind of calms down a bit and things get a little bit more sane, I don't know if that'll happen, but if it does get a bit more sane, then it's definitely an area of the world, like I say, I'd like to come and have a little exploration tour of.
I would love to have you. I really hope you will come, and let's talk again soon.